The salt spray felt like needles on my skin. Or maybe that was just the frost forming inside my veins as I listened to the words. "You won't be needing it anymore, Mother." That's what he said. My son, Liam. He said it with the casual indifference of someone announcing the weather, his breath pluming in the frigid Maine air. He dangled the keys to my house. The salt-bleached cedar home my late husband Arthur and I had built with our own blistered hands and passed them to Isabel's father. A gift, like a bottle of cheap wine at a dinner party. I stood on the wraparound porch, a ghost in my own life, silent. My heart wasn't just broken. It was a crater, a void where something warm and vital used to be. Liam stood beside his wife Isabel, whose lips were curled into a triumphant smirk, her arms crossed over her cashmere sweater as if to physically contain her satisfaction. Her parents, the new proprietors of my existence, were already hauling monogrammed luggage from the trunk of their gleaming black Mercedes, marching toward my home as if they had held the deed for generations. My home. The one with the climbing roses Arthur planted for our 10th anniversary. Their thorns like tiny guardians of our memory. The one with the sea glass tiles we'd painstakingly set into the kitchen backsplash, each piece a story from a walk on Seabrook Point. The one where I had birthed my son, nursed my husband, and planned to quietly live out the remainder of my days, wrapped in the comfort of its walls. I looked at them, my son, the stranger, his wife, the conqueror, her parents, the vultures. And a strange, terrifying calm washed over me. I smiled, a small, tight curve of my lips that didn't reach my eyes. "All right," I said, my voice a papery whisper. They didn't hear the tremor of tectonic plates shifting beneath the single word. They didn't see the Arctic fire kindling in my gaze. They should have. They should have realized that this wasn't a surrender. It was a declaration of war. I was walking away, yes, but I was walking toward a reckoning they could never possibly anticipate. I clutched my worn leather handbag, its strap a lifeline, and turned my back on them as their laughter echoed behind me, carried on the sharp, salty wind. Liam didn't even look back. Not once. I drove toward Boston, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my body trembling not with sorrow, but with a fury so pure and cold it could have frozen the Atlantic. You see, when Arthur passed 2 years ago after a battle that stole his strength but never his spirit, he left me everything. The house, the land it stood on, the savings we had meticulously gathered over 40 years. We were not people of great wealth, but that house was our masterpiece. It was the physical manifestation of our life's partnership. When Liam lost his job at the tech firm and came slinking back home, tail between his legs, I didn't hesitate. I opened my arms and my home. I gave him and Isabel the entire guest wing, the one with the ocean view. I cooked their meals, laundered their clothes, and rocked their colicky infant daughter, Charlotte, through sleepless nights, asking for nothing in return. I thought we were a family, a word that, I was beginning to learn, had been redefined behind my back. The change began subtly after Arthur's funeral, a slow, insidious poison. First, it was Isabel, suggesting a fresh start for me in a Boston condo. "The city has so much more to offer a woman of your age, Eleanor," she'd chirped, her voice dripping with false concern. Then it became, "This house is an awfully big burden for one person." That was Liam, parroting her words, his gaze always skittering away from mine. Finally, it devolved into, we could make much better use of the space. For Charlotte. For our future. I had laughed then. A genuine disbelieving laugh, because the sheer audacious cruelty of it seemed impossible. I was a fool. A week before the key ceremony on my porch, I'd been awake late, unable to settle my grief. I overheard them in the kitchen, their voices hushed but sharp. "She will never agree to it, Liam. She's too attached to this old relic, Isabel hissed. She will, my son's voice, a blade in the darkness. I'll make her. We just have to be strategic. Keep telling her she can't manage it alone. Mention how stubborn she's getting. Make her feel like she's in the way. A burden. Eventually she'll break. That night, I didn't just cry. I shattered. My own child, the boy whose fevers I had cooled with damp cloths, whose scraped knees I had kissed, whose future I had prayed for, had meticulously planned my obsolescence. He had turned his mother into an inconvenience to be managed. But I did not fight him. Not then, because I held an ace. A secret tucked away like a pressed flower in a beloved book. A secret they, in their arrogant rush, would never have thought to look for. Arthur, my brilliant, forward-thinking Arthur, had known the world better than I did. 6 months before he passed, when the doctor's words grew softer and their faces more grim, he had taken me to our lawyer in the city. Quietly, without fanfare, we restructured the ownership of the Seabrook Point house. It wasn't just in my name. It was in an irrevocable trust, a legal fortress designed to be impenetrable. The trust stipulated that ownership could not be transferred, sold, or gifted without my explicit, notarized, and witnessed consent. To protect you, Ellie, he had whispered, his hand frail but firm over mine, from anything and everything. So yes, Liam gave them the keys. Yes, they moved their sterile, modern furniture into my warm, memory-filled rooms. They even posted a nauseatingly cheerful video tour on social media, captioning it, "Our new permanent vacation home, #blessed." But they never checked the county records. They never looked at the deed. They assumed. I let them. I let them repaint my sea-green living room a soulless, trendy gray. I let them rip out the ancient rose bushes, their thorny skeletons protesting against the sky. I let them get comfortable. I let them believe they had won. Then, from the quiet of my tiny rented apartment in Boston, I picked up the phone and called the lawyer. "It's time," I said, my voice steady as stone as I sipped a cup of Earl Grey. Time to wake them from their dream. The legal machinery, once set in motion, was a beautiful and terrible thing to behold. A cease and desist letter, a formal eviction notice, a lawsuit for unlawful occupation and damages. It was all prepared and filed within 48 hours. The fun was about to begin. The next morning I drove back to Seabrook Point. I felt no anxiety, only a profound and chilling sense of purpose. I parked my modest sedan down the road, hidden by a cluster of windswept pines, and I watched. I watched as the lawyer's impeccably dressed paralegal, a young man with the predatory grace of a shark, walked up my gravel driveway holding a pristine leather portfolio. Liam came out onto the porch, a confused frown on his face. The frown turned to panic as the paralegal began to speak. I saw Isabel appear behind him, her face contorting into a mask of rage. I saw her parents, who had been enjoying coffee on my porch swing, look as if they'd seen a specter rise from the sea. That was my cue. I stepped out of the car. My sensible heels clicked on the gravel, each step a hammer blow against their stolen peace. I walked toward them, my posture erect, my chin high. "You didn't really think I would just give it all away, did you?" I asked, my voice carrying clearly in the morning air. I met each of their eyes, one by one. Liam, Isabel, her mother, her father. I saw confusion morph into dawning, horrified comprehension. Liam stumbled forward, his hands raised placatingly. "Mom, please. There's been a misunderstanding. We can talk about this." I raised a single hand, stopping him in his tracks. "No," I said, the word as final as a gravestone. "You gave away something that was never yours to give, and now your time here is over." The shock that radiated from them wasn't just about losing a free luxury home. It was the far deeper, more terrifying shock of realizing they had underestimated their opponent. They were staring at me, at the woman they had written off as a frail, grieving old widow, and seeing a stranger. They were realizing, far too late, that they never knew me at all. Liam's mouth flapped open and closed, a fish gasping for air on dry land. Isabel clutched her smartphone like a talisman, her knuckles white. Her mother, a woman who probably hadn't experienced a genuine hardship in her entire life, was already weeping theatrically into a silk handkerchief. Her father, his face a blotchy, apoplectic red, looked at me as if I were the trespasser. "Mom, please," Liam finally managed, taking another step. "Let's just go inside. We can sort this out." A polite, cold smile touched my lips. I took a deliberate step back. "No, Liam. We can't. The time for talking is past." He blinked, the incomprehension still clouding his features. "Why are you doing this?" That question, more than the betrayal itself, was a fresh wound. The audacity of it, to cast me as the villain in a tragedy he had authored, as if he hadn't stood on this very spot a week ago and casually discarded my life's work. "You should have read the paperwork," I said softly, letting the words land with precision. "You never bothered to ask who actually owned the house." Isabel lunged forward, her voice shrill. "We've put money into this place. We painted. We bought new furniture." I gave a slight dismissive nod. "That's a lovely thought. But your decorating choices do not constitute a legal claim. This house was never yours. It never belonged to Liam. It belongs to a trust, and the trust wants you out. You have 30 days. The paralegal, with perfect timing, stepped forward and handed the portfolio of documents to Liam. I didn't even flinch when Isabel's father let loose a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. I just stood there, a granite statue of resolve, feeling the same grim strength I'd felt watching them lower Arthur's casket into the cold earth. Some griefs don't break you. They fire you in a kiln, hardening you into something unbreakable. They slammed the heavy oak door in my face. It didn't matter. I had already won the war. For the next 3 days, I didn't go near the house. I took refuge in Boston with my oldest friend, Beatrice. Bea was my college roommate, a fiery artist with a laugh like a brass band and a spine of pure titanium. When I told her the whole sordid story over chamomile tea, she didn't even blink. "I told you that girl was a viper," she said, pouring more tea with a satisfying clatter. "And your son, honestly, Eleanor, I'd be tempted to slap some sense into him myself." A real smile, the first in weeks, touched my lips. But the ache was still there, a low hum beneath the surface of my anger. Bea saw it. She leaned forward, her expression softening. "Are you sure you want to see this through to the bitter end?" I nodded, my resolve hardening once more. "They have to learn, Bea. You don't steal from someone who gave you everything. There must be consequences." She smiled, a slow, wolfish grin. "Good. Then let's make it memorable." The following weekend, I returned to Seabrook Point. I wasn't alone. Bea came with me, as did my lawyer and a burly, silent man from a locksmithing company. They watched from the bay windows, their faces pale and furious, as the locksmith efficiently drilled out the lock Isabel had installed. My lawyer stood sentinel, holding the court order. The locksmith just hummed a cheerful, off-key tune as he worked, a bizarre soundtrack to their eviction. With a final click, the door swung open. They stood there, a tableau of impotent rage. Isabel's father puffed up his chest, looking like he might throw a punch, but my lawyer simply raised the papers. "Any attempt to interfere with this court-ordered action," he stated in a calm, lethal tone, "will result in immediate legal consequences for all parties present, including, but not limited to, arrest for contempt of court." The bravery evaporated from the room like morning mist. I stepped inside, and I gasped. A wave of nausea rolled over me. They had painted the living room in a jarring, acidic shade of lemon yellow. My antique porcelain vases were gone. The worst of it, the blow that struck me deepest, was the mantelpiece. It was empty. The large, silver-framed photograph of Arthur, the one where he was laughing on our wedding day, was gone. I turned slowly, my entire body humming with a dangerous energy. "Where?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. "Is my husband's picture?" Isabel had the decency to look momentarily flustered. We put it in the basement storage." "It didn't really go with the new color scheme." My hand began to tremble, but I locked my voice in a cage of ice. "You put my husband in the basement." Behind me I heard Bea whisper, "Oh, honey, they done messed up now." I didn't scream. I didn't raise my voice. I walked with preternatural calm to the basement door, went down the creaking steps, and found Arthur's smiling face leaning against a damp concrete wall next to a box of discarded Christmas decorations. I retrieved the photograph, cradling it to my chest. Then I walked back upstairs, looked my lawyer dead in the eye, and said, "They have 7 days, not 30. 7. I want this house emptied and cleaned. I want every single thing that belongs to me left intact. If so much as a teacup is missing, they can explain to a judge why they chose to disrespect a court order." The next week was, I admit, deliciously satisfying. I would park down the street and watch. Moving trucks rumbled in and out. Furniture was hauled away. Her parents scowled at me whenever they caught a glimpse of my car. Liam, to his credit, couldn't seem to look me in the eye at all. But this wasn't about vengeance, not really. It was about dignity. It was for me, for the woman who had built a life, raised a child, buried a husband, and refused to be erased. On the 7th day, I walked back into my house. It was empty, spotless. The air smelled of bleach instead of memories, but it was mine. The rose garden was a field of mud, but the house itself still stood, my home. I placed Arthur's photograph back in its rightful place on the mantelpiece and whispered, "We're home." Just then, a tentative knock sounded at the door. It was Liam. Alone. He stood awkwardly on the porch, clutching a small, damp cardboard box. "Mom," he said, his eyes fixed on the floorboards. I saved some of the clippings from the rose bushes. I thought maybe you'd want them." My chest constricted. I didn't answer. And I simply stepped aside, holding the door open. He walked in, but I knew this wasn't just an apology. This was something else. Another chapter was about to begin, whether I was ready for it or not. Liam stepped over the threshold like a trespasser, his shoulders hunched. He held the cardboard box as if it contained a live bird, fragile and easily crushed. I didn't speak. I just watched him, not as a mother watches a son, but as a sailor watches a distant, unpredictable storm. He stood in the foyer, near the old grandfather clock, whose steady tick-tock had been the heartbeat of this house for 40 years. Arthur used to wind it every Sunday. Liam's eyes darted around the empty space, as if seeing it for the first time. "I brought these," he repeated, his voice raspy, holding the box out to me. I took it. Inside, nestled in damp soil, were a dozen short, thorny stems, my roses, the ones Arthur had called his sunshine roses because of their vibrant yellow hue. I ran a finger over the edge of a plastic pot. The soil was cold. "They're not blooming," I stated, the words flat. "They will," he replied quickly. They just need time." So do I thought. I turned toward the kitchen. "Do you want tea?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second. Yeah, sure. I motioned to the small breakfast table by the window, the one that caught the morning light. He sat, his posture rigid, his hands clasped on the table. As I filled the kettle, the ghost of another memory surfaced. The last time we'd had tea here together was the day after Arthur's funeral. He had wept that day, real tears, and squeezed my hand. "I'll always take care of you, Mom," he'd vowed. A promise that had dissolved like sugar in hot water. I placed a mug before him and sat opposite. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, staring into his cup. The words hung in the air, hollow. "Are you?" I asked, my voice neutral. "Yes," he insisted, finally looking up. "I didn't know about the trust. I never would have. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just thought—" He trailed off. "You thought what, Liam? You thought I didn't need the house my husband and I built with our own hands? Or you just hoped I'd shuffle off quietly so you wouldn't have to feel guilty?" A flush crept up his neck. "It wasn't like that. You let them erase me from my own home," I pressed on, my voice dropping lower. "You let them put your father's memory in a damp basement because it clashed with their color palette. You didn't ask me. You decided for me. You thought I was a problem to be solved." "No," he whispered. "I thought you were strong. I thought you'd be fine." "You didn't think I was strong," I said coldly. "You thought I was weak. And you have their smell on you, Isabel and her parents. That stench of entitlement. It's in your clothes. It's in your eyes." "I'm not like them," he muttered. "Aren't you?" Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Finally, he took a shaky breath, and I saw tears welling in his eyes. "They kicked me out." That made me pause. "What?" "Last night. Isabel and her parents. They said I embarrassed the family, that I was weak for letting you get the law involved, that I brought shame on them." I stared at him, the irony a bitter pill. "You mean to tell me they used you to get what they wanted and then discarded you the moment you became an inconvenience?" He nodded slowly, the full weight of his folly crashing down on him. "And Isabel, your wife?" "She's staying with them," he whispered. "She said she needs to reflect on the kind of man I've become." A laugh escaped me, a hollow, harsh sound that echoed in the empty kitchen. "She used you, Liam. They all did. You were the key, and now that the lock has changed, you're no longer useful. And you come here? To me? What do you want? Sympathy?" "No," he said, his voice cracking. "I came here because it's the only place that has ever felt like home." My throat tightened. A wave of fury and sorrow washed over me. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand why he only realized that after he had tried to give it away. But I held my tongue. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and beneath the shame and the exhaustion, I saw a glimmer of the little boy he once was, lost and scared. "I don't know who I am anymore," he whispered. "You're a man who made a terrible mistake," I said, my voice softening almost imperceptibly. "And now you have the opportunity to decide what kind of man you're going to be next." Hope flickered in his eyes. "I want to fix this. Us." I leaned back. "You can't fix this with a box of dormant roses, Liam. Trust isn't a weed. It doesn't just grow back on its own." "I know," he said quickly, "but I want to try. I want to earn it." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, rust-pitted key. "I found this in Dad's old toolbox in the garage. I think it's for the garden shed. I figured I could start by rebuilding the rose beds, the way they were." I stared at the key. My fingers twitched, but I didn't take it. "Put it on the table," I said. He complied. "Now go." What? Go. Not forever. Just for now. Go find a room in town. Let me breathe. Let me think. He hesitated, then gave a slow, defeated nod. Okay, Mom. I watched him walk out the door and drive away. I sat there for a long time, staring at the little key on my kitchen table. That night I called Bea. Well, she asked, skipping the pleasantries. Did the prodigal son cry? Almost, I said. She snorted. Good, it's a start. So what now, Eleanor? Do you think people can really change? I looked out the window at the dark, wounded earth where my garden used to be. I don't know, Bea. But Arthur always said you judge a man not by how he falls, but by how he gets back up. The next morning I sent Liam a single text message. Be here at 7 a.m., bring work gloves. At 6:59 a.m., his beat-up sedan pulled into the driveway. He got out wearing old jeans and a faded hoodie. He looked tired, but he also looked present, grounded. I was waiting on the porch with 2 mugs of coffee. I was sure you'd come, I said, handing one to him. I just wanted to see if you'd be early or late. I'm on time, he said. It's a start, I replied, and led him to the barren patch of earth. That section was your father's, the yellow ones. This side was mine, white climbers. Let's get to work. We worked in silence for hours, turning the soil, mixing in compost, gently placing the fragile clippings into the earth. It was awkward. He was clumsy, but he listened. He learned. By noon, we had planted a ghost of a garden. For the next several weeks, that was our routine. He would arrive at 7, and we would work. We rebuilt the flower beds. We revarnished the porch swing. We repainted the kitchen, this time in a soft sea green, the color of memory. He never complained. He never asked for anything. He just showed up and did the work. One evening, Bea came to visit, finding us sitting on the porch as the sun went down. She looked at Liam, then at the newly tended garden, and then at me. So, she said to me, loud enough for him to hear, probation over? I looked at my son, who was watching the horizon. Ask me again when the roses bloom, I said. And then, one morning, they did. It happened overnight. I stepped onto the porch with my morning coffee and stopped dead. The garden was on fire with color. Vibrant yellows, creamy whites, and even a few defiant pink blooms from a hardy old bush we thought was lost. It was as if the earth itself had decided to forgive. Liam was already there, kneeling by the soil, a look of awe on his face. They opened, he said, his voice full of wonder. I knelt beside him, my anger, that cold, hard shield I had carried for so long, finally melting away. He had done the work. He had shown up. He had earned this moment. Just then, a sleek black car purred into the driveway. Isabel. She stepped out, radiating confidence, her sunglasses a dark mask. But when she saw us, together, in the middle of a resurrected garden, her composure faltered. Liam, she called, her voice sharp. Your parents are worried sick. They're your parents, Isabel, he said calmly, standing up. And they threw me out. You stood there and let them. You embarrassed them, she snapped, dragging lawyers into a private family matter. Liam looked at her, his gaze steady. I was thinking about the woman who raised me, the one I betrayed because you told me to. He took a breath. We're married, Isabel, but I don't think we should be. I want a partner, not a warden who tells me which parts of my life to discard. Is this because of her? She spat, glaring at me. I smiled faintly. I didn't poison him, dear, I said, stepping forward. I just watered him after you left him for dead." Her mouth opened and closed. For the first time, she was speechless. Without another word, she spun around, got back in her car, and sped away, leaving a cloud of dust in her wake. That evening, as the sky turned to bruised shades of orange and purple, Liam handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it. It was the deed, the original copy he'd retrieved from the county courthouse. "I wanted you to have it," he said, "where it belongs." I ran my hand over Arthur's signature, then my own. It felt heavier and more precious than gold. "I trust you, Liam," I whispered. His eyes filled with tears, the ones he hadn't shed before. "I don't deserve that yet." "Maybe not," I said, looking out at the blooming roses, their fragrance a sweet perfume on the evening air. "But you're earning it." We sat together on the porch swing, the house a quiet guardian at our backs, the stars beginning to appear in the vast sky. The house was mine, yes, but for the first time in a long, painful time, I felt like I had gotten my son back too. And that was a foundation no one could ever take away.